Hi, everyone. Welcome to ThinkLead. It's a global leadership ecosystem, and it's all about helping leaders think and lead on a whole new level. We need to get leaders to think about everything at an unprecedented level, the world, their organization, themselves, their families, their lives. It's a whole new world out there, and we're very excited to get some great leaders on this panel today. What Brian, Eagar, and I do is we invite top leaders for a couple of minutes, half hour, to just talk about their thinking and their leading during this difficult times, and then give us some tips as we move forward the next 100 days. So with us today, very excited, Francois Hardy, Newmont, Ghana, Regional Senior Vice President there. So in the mining industry, we've got Neil Cloete, Managing Director, Grinaker Construction Company Limited. I think, do I say REHM? REHM? REHM?
It's REHM, yeah, REHM Grinaker.
Grinaker, that's right, Construction Company Limited. And Philip Kotze, Managing Director, Clover Alloys SA Pty Limited. So an interesting mix today, strong mining backgrounds as well as construction. And we're very excited to hear the views of these great leaders on our platform today. Welcome, gents.
Thanks, Adriaan.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
And of course, the fifth figure there is Brian Eagar, my colleague and great man, understands leadership inside out, works with leaders like this and their teams, many of them, and he's our sounding board, our analyzer. So he listens carefully, he asks these questions as well, but he summarizes what these great men are saying as we have a spontaneous conversation. So, Brian, welcome.
Adriaan, once again, thank you very much. What's really nice about today is we have Francois Hardy, who's sitting, it's 2 o'clock, Francois, just after 2 in Perth.
That's right, 2 p.m.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that. Sorry, Francois.
Francois in Perth, and Neil's sitting in Mauritius, and Paul's up in Centurion. So if you think about it, it's our first panel interview where we're dealing with folk of this caliber and ilk from 3 different parts of the world, all at the same time. So yeah, it's really amazing to have Neil and Francois and Philip, not only 3 good gents and good leaders, in fact, fantastic leaders, but good friends of mine. So I really going to enjoy this one. Over to you, Adriaan.
Yes, and to add very quickly before we get to the meat of things, Brian, you're in Cape Town. I'm next to Kruger here in Mpumalanga. So this is the amazing thing about technology. We're literally spread across the world. So gentlemen, let's kick off. Let's talk about your thinking after the first just over 100 days of this crazy lockdown. Certainly in South Africa, different levels of lockdown, but we're still in it. We want your thinking personally, where you're at, but maybe give us a taste of where your organization is at as you share openly what your thinking is in this unique environment. So just general discussion. Let's kick off. Let's kick off with Francois. We go to Neil and then Philip.
Sure, no problem, Adriaan. Thanks for the introduction. I think if I think about where we are at the moment, I've got a team of people spread across the globe. Within our company, which we operate in Ghana. Obviously, Newmont operates across the globe: North America, South America, Africa, and Australia. With myself leading the African team, I've got 2 of my people sitting in North America. I've got 2 of them sitting in South America. I've got a few in South Africa, and I've got a few here in Australia. So typically when we have a team get together, I've got people getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I've got people at midnight dialing into the same meeting. So a bit of a challenge. And if you had asked me 5 months ago if we would ever be able to operate our operations remotely, I would have said no. And here we are 4 months into the pandemic. Since we shut up our office in Ghana, we removed all non-business critical people from our sites. So we only have production critical people on our sites. So about 2,500 people on site at the moment, and about another 2,000 people either working remotely, not working, or contributing from all over the world at the moment. So bit of a challenge. But I must admit, the team has really come together well. We've been able to keep all our people safe. We've had a number of COVID cases at both our mine sites. One of our mine sites peaked at about 43 people that had COVID, and obviously a number of people in isolation. We're back down to 2 at that site, and the other site we have about 8 people with COVID at the moment. Pleased to say, all of them very mild symptoms, most of them asymptomatic, to be honest. And you know, we've gone through the stigmatization that you get when you have people with coronavirus, and the fact that they've been able to come back in, been welcomed back in by their teams and their crews is a testament to the people of Ghana in terms of how they operate. So very proud of them. Ultimately, you know, in terms of the operations, we've been able to keep going, and we have a number of communities that rely on both those operations to keep open, and we've been providing a lot of support in our local communities and to the government of Ghana of late to try and stem the tide of COVID. So in a nutshell, you know, the challenge we have, we've got 8 different time zones. We've got 8 different countries we have people in at the moment, operating 2 mines and a few exploration plays in Ghana and Ethiopia. So a little bit of a challenge. And on a personal basis, I think it's now 4 months in for me, personally operating here from Perth. And it's been a challenge. You know, it absolutely has. You know, not only do you have meetings across the day, because even though we are apart, we're actually more connected nowadays with things like Zoom and the platforms we use internally that are more accessible now than what I am when I'm sitting in my office in Accra. So, you know, that's been a challenge on a personal nature that I've struggled to overcome, you know, with my trying to spend time with the family, trying to spend time sitting in phone calls the whole time, and, you know, try to keep healthy and the like is really been a challenge. It's not one that I've absolutely beaten yet, but it continues to be a challenge that we go through. But, you know, pleased to say that that the company is very supportive of how we're operating. At the same time, very proud of my team back in Ghana.
Thank you, Francois. Thank you for that. Neil.
Cool. Okay. Well, I appreciate Francois' job having to deal with multiple countries. We are a much simpler operation. We are a Mauritian business, and we're based purely in Mauritius. So obviously a relatively small island, but we're a reasonably big company in a small place. So we are top 100 Mauritian business, and obviously we have challenges, but of a different magnitude. Just some of my own experience. I left. I'm South African, so I'm here on assignment. I left South Africa on the 7th of January 2020, seven months ago or so. Said goodbye to my family at the airport, and obviously came back to Mauritius. My wife, and COVID had just started. I mean, it had literally been around for 7 days. I think the last day of December 2019 was when the first case was announced. So my wife visits. She was due to visit on the 19th of March, and she phoned me from the airport, Tambo, and said, my flight's been cancelled. So I phoned the travel agent and said, what's happening? They said, sorry, all flights to Mauritius are off. So today is the 29th of July. The last time I saw my wife or family was on the 7th of January. So that's been a challenge. So I've been not only have been isolated from a curfew perspective, I've been isolated from a family perspective. So we've had that's been a different challenge altogether. Having to live on your own and be in isolation and manage your business and yourself is quite an interesting challenge. But you also learn from it, and you become a lot more efficient in some of the things that you do. From a business perspective, the curfew kicked into Mauritius at 10 o'clock on the night of the 19th of March. The Prime Minister made an announcement. Everybody waited with bated breath. It ran about 2 hours late, so it was supposed to be about 8 o'clock. It actually happened at 10 o'clock that evening. and he announced that the country was on lockdown and curfew from 6 o'clock the next morning. So for starters, we running a business. We got multiple contracts throughout the island, and the curfew starts in 8 hours. This was another interesting challenge. Luckily, Mauritius has a very strong cyclone protocol, and basically we implemented cyclone protocol number 4, which is batten down hatches, and everybody knew exactly what that meant. So teams went onto site. They shut down the contracts. It's very the radio announcement system is very Mauritius, announced in French, Creole, English, all of these things, and from 6 o'clock on Friday morning, that was it. All of our sites were closed. We had an opportunity to apply for some essential services, but we needed permits for that, and that took a couple of days. So a company like ourselves, we were only issued with about 25 permits. So out of 800 employees or so, 25 people had a work permit, which meant that they could deal with essential services or emergency requirements of our clients or our contracts that were shut down. So that's just a little bit of a background, and obviously that created some challenges. As Francois alluded, we also had to upskill ourselves very quickly in terms of technology. We use a different the Microsoft platform, but notwithstanding that, it wasn't something that we'd used throughout our business. So we had some very quick learning to do. And prior to shutdown, obviously we had set up a task team around COVID. Just around communication and forming a trust chain, because there was so much, I think the word is, it was an infodemic. You were bombarded with information, and tried to filter that information so that you could share it with your people and communicate effectively was equally challenging, and perhaps we can explore a little bit about that later. But yeah, certainly, notwithstanding that we're an island, we're a small place. It's been an interesting challenge. Mauritius is out of lockdown now. We've been out of lockdown since the 1st of June, and it's business as usual in the environment of Mauritius. The borders are still closed, and there's no active cases within. There are some imported cases, and those cases are in quarantine. So we're a little bit like New Zealand, Francois' neighbor, where pretty much it's business as usual, other than the awareness that the borders open, the situation will probably change. Yeah, good.
Thank you, Neil. Sure, personal business challenges. Wow. Neil, Philip, in Gauteng.
Yeah, the first thing that I want to say, you know, your problems are always sort of this huge and difficult to overcome, and then you listen to guys like this, and you say, I don't know what I'm complaining about. So I must start it on a much more positive note, honestly. So our first challenge was on a personal note when we needed to sort of lock down and we weren't exposed to anybody. And I think as leaders, we typically love interaction with people. We love sort of guiding and leading. And that immediately sort of just stopped. And in my personal life, it was important. It was me and my wife. We were basically locked down in the house. You can't see the kids or anybody else, but not nearly as dramatic as what Neil had to expose in that. And it was important for me to sort of just get the normal routine going. I'm typically up fairly early in the morning, and I work literally till about 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night, and then it's family time. And it was important for me to stay in that routine. Now, I couldn't really give a lot of attention to the work, and I'll speak a little bit about that now. And therefore, it was important to sort of find other replacements for it. So on a personal note, I actually started sort of developing a hobby and keeping myself busy. And in my case, I had a workshop here, which I climbed into some woodwork. And I made sure that I stayed in the same routines than what we typically did. And between my wife and I, and we've been married now nearly 40 years, this was no problem. We actually found each other and our company and the time that we could spend together we actually found it very fulfilling. So that in itself, I take away as a positive. On the business side, everything just granted to a halt. Now, just our business, we're involved in Chrome, and I was in the middle of doing a transaction which has been coming over the last sort of 18 months, and we were right at the verge of taking over the mine. It's about 1,800 people employed on the mine, and we were just waiting for Competition Commission clearance and DMRE approval for the mining rights transfer, and the lockdown came, which obviously then stopped the whole process. And firstly, we're a private company, so everybody's money is tight. In our case, I'm working with individuals' money, which I know personally, and therefore it's very important, that you actually make sure you keep all of them abreast of what's happening. The first thing that people sort of wanted in our company is, where do we go from here? And that uncertainty is probably the biggest event that we needed to deal with, or biggest concern. And I found the fact that I didn't know obviously also worried me, but it was important to share that. So to be blatantly honest with your people and say, guys, this uncertainty we're dealing with and this period we're dealing with, we don't know where it's going, but I can tell you that we will sort of think on our feet, and as we go forward, we will find ways and means of dealing with it. And on the Chrome side specifically, after the first month, we are reliant on the mine, which is closest to us, the one that we bought, that supplies us with ROM, a run-of-mine feed. That obviously stopped. When we restarted processing operations again, we were in a very fortunate position where everybody sort of went around and found processing material, which got us going 6 weeks after the initial lockdown, and we've been going ever since. We managed to pay our people, which I thought was very important, specifically for a small company. And personally, I think that we have actually developed a lot of loyalty from our workers in this period. So through the difficult times that we had, I think we actually, at this stage, came out stronger, and we'll continue to sort of grow stronger as we go forward with this. It's an opportunity to pull everybody together. That's what happens in a time of crisis, in my mind. And that's, I think, the opportunity that we have now.
Thank you, Philip. Sure, Brian, it's rough. It's interesting to hear it from the personal and the business perspective, as always. Your quick reflection?
Sir Winston Churchill said famously, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think all three gents, stepping in, stepping up, and doing what you need to do in your respective areas. I held a Zoom event yesterday evening, and one of the things that one of the gents said was the most difficult thing that he's having to endure at the moment, given that I think it's 117 days in, is when you do town hall talks. And I know, Francois, you do your town halls, and Neil, I'm sure you do very similar, for you pull your teams together. But he was saying, when you do your town hall talks and you talk to a screen and you see no faces, you're just seeing this blank screen. People on the other end. And the difficulty is you don't know after 117 days if people are actually listening anymore. Are people, they mute their mute buttons on? Are they sleeping? Are they snoozing? And that's what he was sharing. The difficulty that he's experiencing at the moment is, how do you keep your teams going when you can't see a reaction, you can't see their faces? So that was interesting as an observation last night. But I think the way you guys engage and the way you've led and managed your teams, and the questions you call on your teams when you put questions to them, I don't think you guys have that problem or that challenge. So yeah, it's a hell of a tough at the moment. And all three of you, as I said, by the sounds of things, have stepped up and have stepped into things. You haven't leaned away from things. You've leaned forward and into them. And that's a great message that we can take out to the rest of the leaders that Adriaan and I deal with, and the message that you can then give to, that you've given to those that are going to listen. Step in, step up, don't step away. Yeah, Adriaan.
Thanks, Brian. Gentlemen, tell us what you've learned regarding leadership. I mean, you've all been on programs, you've physically and practically led for years and decades. All of you large organizations in your own way, hundreds or thousands of people. I mean, no business school can come up with a case study like this. Maybe they can now envision it in the future, make it as bad as you possibly can. But there's no case study that you've ever looked at probably that could prepare you for this crazy scenario. So what have you learned about leadership in this period? Maybe about yourself as well. And as you reflect back to us on that, I have a question to you about holding people accountable. When you're in a business where the performance cannot happen because of external conditions, how the hell do you hold people accountable? Business is all about accountability. You must perform, you must produce, you must sell, you must, whatever it is, you must build and construct in a certain period. Suddenly, everyone's got an excuse for not performing, if I can use the word excuse so lightly. So what have you learned about leadership? But how do you hold people accountable in a place, in a period where they can't perform? Let's kick off with Neil. Neil. Let's go with Neil, and then Philip, and then we'll go to Francois.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Adriaan. I think, no matter where we were in the world and our role as leaders, we also had to follow. So the government set the scene in a lot of respects. So it doesn't matter whether we wanted to work or not. The government said you cannot. It doesn't matter whether we wanted to get together and meet or not. The government said you can't. So, so there's just some interesting, just watching the world leaders, how the world leaders have dealt with this thing is also quite an interesting example. And from my perspective, the leaders that has had the most exposure in the areas that I watch are Ramaphosa, because I'm South African, and Trump and Johnson, because Sky News and CNN. So and clearly all of those leaders have made mistakes. So just like they've made mistakes, so no doubt have we. If we had to turn the clock back, would we do things differently? And there's no question that in some cases we would have. Personally, our own business was perhaps behind the curve in not foreseeing a lockdown quickly enough, and being prepared for things like face masks. So all of a sudden, we knew that at some stage we had to go back to work, and when we went back to work, we'd have to give our employees PPE. Now you're in lockdown, and you haven't got any PPE, and you can't get any. So how are you going to go back to work? This was a real challenge, and credit to our procurement teams that really put it out there through, to ensure that we got PPE from all over the world. But then to get it to Mauritius was another story, because it's not locally manufactured. Same with thermometers, infrared thermometers. We didn't have a stock of infrared thermometers. You couldn't get hand sanitizer for love or money. Never mind toilet paper. I mean, the hand sanitizer was the issue for us. So these are, if I turned back the clock, I would have said, hey, pandemic, these are the basic things we need. Make sure we've got a stock of them, and we have now, obviously, but we didn't then, and initially it was a real challenge for us to get that in place. So just getting back to government. So the government said we can't work. You have to stay at home. You can't go out. Mauritius was very dictatorial. In fact, it had one of the strictest regimes in the world in terms of what you could and couldn't do. And after you could go grocery shopping, but after 1 week, they realized that the grocery shopping issue was a disaster in Mauritius. Everybody was storming the shelves. There was no social distancing in place. So they closed all supermarkets for 8 days, just like that. Nothing. No, you could not, if you didn't have any food in your house, you couldn't get any. So there was some community involvement, that if you lived in a community, there was a bit of sharing. The government did some emergency supplies. Fortunately, most expats were fortunate enough to have a basic stock of requirements. But these are situations that you can't plan for, And you can't also reach out to your 800 employees to find out if they're okay, because most of your 800 employees, in our case, are unskilled or semi-skilled employees, and you're relying on your communication chain to communicate down in the normal sense. So if we had a Zoom call to our people, if we got that Zoom call out to 150 out of 800, that we'd be doing very well. So, so quite challenging to communicate down to all levels of our organization. Challenging to do the procurement in a lockdown situation, and not being able to understand the logistics chain. Somebody says, "Don't worry, it's on the next plane to Mauritius." Well, when's the next plane to Mauritius? You don't know. So massive uncertainty around delivery schedules. So leadership, I think we learned a lot from the various governments, as I said, and the Mauritian government was no different. I think that they could have been a little bit more empathetic. There was a government wage assistance scheme. So they closed the business down. We, like Philip, we are a private company, but our shareholders are not individuals. Our shareholders are corporates. So we've got three shareholders, all of which are listed entities, 2 in Mauritius and 1 in South Africa. The managing shareholder is a South African. So the first thing they did on the lockdown is they said, "No work, no pay." So I said, okay, well, unfortunately, this is Mauritius. No work, no pay doesn't work here. There's a completely different Workers' Rights Act, a lot more liberal if you're a worker, and if you close the business down and it's no fault of the employee, you pay the employee. So the government stepped in, and if you earn below a certain benchmark, the government actually paid. And they made that announcement. It was welcome, everybody, fantastic. And we all rushed off and applied for the government wage assistance scheme, and it was largely paid. Then about 8 weeks after that, the government said, by the way, what we didn't tell you is you have to pay it back.
That's incredible. Yeah.
It doesn't. We still would have taken the loan, and obviously it's not as simple as just paying it back. What they were trying to say is that if you were a massively profitable company, and you had, let's just say you were a, I don't want to use a name, but a massively profitable company, and you took part in the wage assistance scheme, this would not be fair play. And basically they expected the profitable companies to pay the money back, that if you were showing a loss, you wouldn't have to, but if the repayment period was 2 years. So if you made a loss this year because of COVID, but were positive next year, then you would be expected to pay a portion back the following year. So the government also flip-flopped on a couple of issues. But certainly, how do you hold people to account? With great difficulty. I think you just had to embrace trust. To trust that your workers that were able to work from home, your employees that were able to work from home, did in fact do so with reasonable diligence. We never set up any system at all to log your hours, to share exactly what you're doing. It was a trusting environment. No one expected in your wildest dreams that you would have to work 8 hours a day, all day, every day, because it's just not practical. When you're in a house with dogs and kids and cats and grandparents and whatever else is going on. So you're expected to be diligent about your work, to have flexi time as and when required during the week or weekends. You were not allowed to exercise in Mauritius. So if you went outside, you had to have a permit, or you did so illegally. You were at risk of being fined. So you were really bound to your house. A lot of people did exercise, and the law enforcement kind of overlooked it if you took care. But accountability, you had to hand over the baton of trust to your employees to be accountable to themselves. That's how we managed it.
Neil, before we go to Philip, and maybe Philip and Francois can also answer, when as you made trust the main currency, in relationships, just very 10 seconds in general, would you say people responded?
Yeah, I think there will, there's always going to be the 80-20 rule, probably. So I think 80 to 90% of the people responded positively, and there were probably 10% that might have abused a bit of it. Yeah. But I think largely there was a positive response.
Okay, Philip, learned from leadership or about leadership, and how do you hold people accountable?
So I think, firstly, on the leadership side, most of us that sort of are leaders enjoy working with people right next to them, and sort of utilize that personal contact to motivate people and sort of lead with them. That obviously couldn't happen. So I think that is the one thing that I probably think impacted most on it for us. As a leader, it was important for us to get a strategy realigned under this current conditions that people can believe in again. And being a small company, you're always at risk and haven't got that deep pockets. People are very concerned, and therefore it was important for us to get a new strategy that people can buy into, which people wanted to belong to, and get them back to work as soon as possible. In the processing plants, the most happy individual you can have is to be back on the place where he daily works, and that is what gives him certainty in life. He gets his pay at the end of the month, and he's back to sort of his usual certainty in life. So for me, it was important that we get a strategy that people want to buy into, and that they're happy to follow along. Sketch the sort of path for them that they can see. This is a difficult time, and quite frankly, it wasn't easy before that. We weren't making, none of us, I'm sure, were making sort of mega profits when this pandemic hit us. So it was already under difficult circumstances, which we needed to reposition. That is it. Right now, on the Chrome side, the fact that we were busy with the transaction, in my case, really excited everybody, because we're growing. The company is going to sort of be 3 times, 4 times bigger than what we were, and we've got much better certainty and consistency for the future. That's something that I could sell to my people, and that they were happy to sort of follow up on and to support. On the farming side, another sort of venture we've got, their people continued working without any problem. I mentioned to Brian earlier on, we actually opened a deli, sort of part of our value extension, just a week before the lockdown started. That's dealing with public, and if you don't sell, you're not going to get income in it. So we needed to make sure, one of the things that came through for me very strongly was internet sales. I think all of us got used to start buying things through internet, which were not the typical way that I did business previously. I bought some stuff there. Right now, that has just grown tenfold. And that's sort of the opportunity that we saw in the deli to get that going. As far as keeping people responsible, I think coming from where I come, typically a lot of people in my generation think that if you're at work, you're working. One of the biggest fallacies that these, it is so important to make sure that people understand what their roles are in the company and what is expected of them. And what I certainly found in this time, or this period, is that we make sure that each individual understands his role in the bigger cog of the business. And whether he does that in 3 hours a day, or whether he needs 16 hours a day, quite frankly, that has never been important to me. It's whether his role in our team, he fulfills that to the team's expectation. So what we did in our case, again, we made sure that role clarity was very clearly defined, and that everybody's responsibilities were defined. We continued, once again, in the normal routine that I discussed earlier. We continued our weekly meetings, even if when the business stopped. We continued with that routine because it gave people certainty that the business is still continuing. And as we sort of opened up again, that obviously picked up momentum. But I must say, I actually think there's a maturity that have come to certainly the people that I've worked with, that if you're at home, you do that work, what is expected of you, within the time that we agreed, but you do it and you make sure that that gets done and you don't let the team down. That was it.
Whole new shift in thinking, which is actually quite fascinating. Francois, your view on leadership and holding people accountable?
No, look, I'm probably going to piggyback much on what Neil and Philip have said. You know, I think trust is important, not just of the individual, but also of the processes that you have in place. You know, we're a mature organization, so we have quite strong, robust processes, and you know, we've always taken them for granted. And at a time like this, and I think Brian said it well, you know, never waste a good pandemic in this case. You know, we set about providing clarity. You know, we wanted the leadership team to come across as calm. We were in control of what we were doing. We had the strategy that Philip was referring to in terms of making sure that, yeah, we didn't have all the answers, and we were honest about that. And, you know, what you can only control what you can control and just manage what you can't. So we were very upfront about that with all our teams around, look, yep, we don't know where this is going to go. We don't know what the government's going to lock down or not lock down. We don't even know if we're going to be allowed to operate. What we do know is what we do day to day, and we do know that we can work with each other, whether it's in the same room or whether it's in the same country or whether it's across 8 different countries. And we trusted that. You know, and I think, you know, this is where your values really comes through. You typically have your values up on the wall, and every now and then you'll remember them and you'll dust them off and you'll kind of quote them when it suits you. But when you go through something like this, you can't talk about your values. How you act and how you behave and the decisions you make makes your values come alive. And you know, we're obviously a large company, so we were lucky enough that we could continue to pay our people, even those that weren't working. So, you know, we continue to pay them up until the end of August. We'll continue to pay them, and it was critical for us to kind of look at the pandemic and go through what we have a response phase in terms of what the things we need to put in place just to keep people healthy and keep the place open. And now we're kind of going into the sustain phase, if you wish. We don't see it as a recovery phase. We think we're going to be in this kind of phase for a while to come. You know, I think we're all sitting around waiting for COVID to end. I think we start talking about it's not going to end. It's going to be a new normal. And to be honest, we're probably in that new normal where we're not going to have people being able to fly back and forth. We're not going to be able to guarantee rosters and get people out and in as required. And, you know, we're going to have some people that are, you know, like we've had people stuck in countries since November last year, right? And we can't get them out of the country at the moment. And those people are sacrificing. To be honest, a lot of those people don't want to leave because they actually feel quite safe at our operations as opposed to going back to Johannesburg and Cape Town and the like. So, you know, we said about, look, we've got a recovery phase or we've got a response phase. Let's put the rules in place and get that operating. Now we're in this sustaining phase, and now it's just about you know, making sure that there is a plan, there is a strategy, making sure that, you know, we've brought people along that journey so they understand where we're trying to get to. We've got the burning platform set up, and we're aligned, and we know what we're going to do going forward. And you know, the team has responded. You know, I think in terms of, you know, you ask about accountability. I haven't had that issue yet. Yes, you know, as Neil said, there's always going to be the 5% of the people that kind of, you know, take a chance and they mess it up for the 95% of people doing the right thing. But the reality is that people have been so focused on trying to get back to work. The most questions I face in my town halls is about when are we opening the offices again, or when are the people working remotely going back to the mines. There's that pull. And so, you know, we're in a lucky position to be there. And in Ghana, there isn't much work. So if people aren't working for a company like Newmont, and there is a status piece that goes with that, being the largest gold producer in the country, you know, they probably won't find other work, especially during this time. So, you know, I've had to actually manage some of my leaders, making sure they don't abuse that fact and kind of kind of take advantage of people as we go. So I think for me, the trust is important. Being calm leadership team with clear direction and providing clarity in terms of what we're doing and how we're doing it, even when we don't know what the answer is, I think is critical. And then there's the whole piece about honest communication. I think, I was on a town hall the other day. We had 778 people dialed in. Most of those people are dialing in from old Nokia phones. So being able to mute is not a luxury they have. So you're kind of hearing what's happening in the village, what's happening in the compound. You're kind of hearing the sheep and the goats in the background and a lot. But being able to communicate with them from a point of, look, we don't know what we don't know, and what we do know is this is what our plan is, and this is how we're going to go forward. And here's the clarity we can give you around work, salaries, and the like. And the fact that, we continue to support the communities where we operate. Because, Ghana, much like parts of South Africa, it's just the local communities don't have access to good healthcare. So what we found was people were coming to site sick, lying. We have like a bit of a test that when they get to the gate, we have a nurse ask them questions, have you travelled, etc., to make a determination whether or not they're at risk, or whether we should have them tested. People would get past that, go straight to the clinic, and then book in there and say, look, I'm sick, I've been sick for a week, I don't know what to do, because they weren't getting that support in the villages. So we've actually found ourselves having to support the local villages in terms of their healthcare provision and the like, so that we can actually screen or pre-screen people before they come to site, so we can keep everyone else healthy. So that's been different, because now suddenly we're not mining. Now we're meddling in politics and we're meddling in healthcare, neither of which excites me all that much. So, that became a new challenge for us. But we had to do that because of the circumstances around the mines we operate. So, I think for me, that honest communication is and it remains critical. And I think both Neil and Philip said it as well. You've got to be humble in that as a leader, where you've got to share what you're personally going through at the same time, so people can learn from what you are learning as you're going through this challenge. So I think for me, the biggest learning is the fact that I could rely on my team and watching members step up in terms of their response, where in the past they haven't been given that opportunity. Now all of a sudden we don't have a choice, and these people are hitting home runs all over the show, and it's just fantastic to see. So I think I've said a fair bit there, but it comes down to that being able to trust not only your people, but also your processes, the honest communication, and then also that clear, calm, thoughtful leadership is critical during this time.
Thank you, Francois. Gents, Brian's going to reflect for us quickly, and then we're winding down with your input in terms of the next 100 days. So, as Francois said clearly, this is probably the new norm. There's no pre and post COVID. There's no during and post COVID. We can't talk post yet. It's going to be with us for a while. So how do you see the next 100 days as a leader? What's your tip, perhaps? And we know that none of us know 100%, but your tip to leaders out there that you think they must keep in mind as they venture towards the next 100 days. But something I want to leave with you, and I just want a yes or a no from you, or just a quick explanation after Brian, is, do you think more trust has crept into the system? Do you think there's more authenticity in the system, more authenticity in relationships, more authenticity in, I don't know, in just life, in society in general, because of what we've been through? I get that impression. So you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I get that impression that more authenticity has crept into people, me, myself, relationships, businesses, society perhaps. And of course, there's always the bad. But just your thoughts on that as you give your advice on the next 100 days. Brian, reflect quickly.
The honesty element. Francois, you spoke about it. Philip, you touched on it a lot. And Neil, you alluded to it. Just be as honest as possible about the situation that you find yourselves in. And I really enjoyed, we want to return back to normal. I think everybody wants to return back to normal. What that normal is, we don't know. But getting the person back into the workfold as quickly as possible so that they're able to do what they're meant to be doing anyway, what they're paid to do. That's the certainty and that's the normality that people are looking for. So that the reinforcing the message, being consistent about we're going to help you get back to where you need to get back to. It addresses that uncertainty. It addresses what makes people uncomfortable. And knowing that you guys are on the side of your teams, that the teams can appreciate that our leaders are on our side and are wanting to get us back to normal as quickly as possible is a good sense. And I think the trust element, Francois, you alluded to it, values are stuff that sits up on the wall, but when you start using the values and they underpin your activities and actions, then of course you can be more trusted. So trusting the teams, trusting the people to get on with their jobs, I almost get a sense from what you've all said is, the trust is going to be there because people actually just want to get back. People just want to get on with things now. It's been 117 days. And to get back to things, to get back to normality, take the fear and anxiety away, is ultimately what we all want. So I think the trust element almost becomes what we want on a day-to-day basis because people just want to get back to normality, and that helps us. So yeah, that's what I picked up, Adriaan.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, let's go. Philip and Francois and Neil. Do we have more authenticity in the system? And your thoughts on the way forward in the next 100 days?
Can I just say before we do, Adriaan, we've got hard starts at 9 o'clock. So if we can ask to summarize these last couple of questions, given we've got 8 minutes left. So, I won't summarize at the end, but if we can just give a précis view, because the hard start is at 9.
Okay.
So let me kick off. Firstly, on authenticity, Adriaan, I don't know, is probably my honest answer. I certainly know that it's put different challenges on us as leaders and our people as such. And to that extent, it sort of it forced us to sort of look through our own filters and see how authentic we are in what we do. Certainly, I've done a lot of introspection in this period for me as a person to see how I'm doing it and how I'm going to go forward with this. I think a lot of the people I work with have done exactly the same, have given thought to that. As far as the future is concerned, I remain hell of optimistic. I think what we are dealing with currently is another set of challenges as all of us have faced in our lives often before. This one is just on a significantly different scale than what we used to. But lo and behold, we find a way of finding a new strategy and a new way of doing business, and we actually take advantage of the opportunities that come to the table. As bad as what it is, but the inefficiencies in the market, in business, are being filtered out at this point in time. And those businesses are actually closing down. I think those are all opportunities that we will pick up again. And the typical supply and demand setup that we're all used to, that creates opportunities for us. I do believe that on the personal income side and sort of expenditure side, I think that that's going to be very tough over the next 3, 4, 5 years. And I think individuals are going to have to adapt to the new for that as well. And I think it's probably that socioeconomic challenge is going to be our biggest challenge. And in a country like South Africa, it's very important to create sustainable businesses where you can employ people in a sustainable way and you can start building the future again. And that's, I think, what we will be focusing on.
Okay. Francois, Neil, very quickly.
Yeah, I think Philip said it quite well. I think authenticity, what I've seen over this time is that empathetic, and I'm seeing that more and more. So I have faith that we'll see more authenticity as we go forward now that this year has become a reality for us. I think in terms of the next 100 days, it's about learning how we've been operating. What can we learn from what we've done the past 100 odd days, and what can we adopt and look at, and to make us more resilient and stronger as we go forward. And I think personally, the ability to have people working remotely. If you had asked me that 5 months ago, I would have said, no, I'm not going to have people running a mine from another country. Can we do it? We can. Maybe not sustainably, but there's opportunities. So what can we learn from that? How can we set ourselves up to face the next pandemic, whatever that might be in future years? So, like Philip, very, very excited about what the future holds.
Thank you. Neil, 1 minute. Last word.
Authenticity, definitely. Having to have authentic conversations with your clients around extension of the time, their challenges with cash flow, so they're having to pay us, but they haven't got the cash, particularly if they're in tourism. So I think a lot more authentic conversations and empathy around that. Going forward, Mauritius does not have a COVID challenge at the moment, so there is a sense of complacency that I trust will change once the borders open. There's a lot of uncertainty around the borders and exactly what that's going to happen, but no question, from our perspectives as contractors, the market is probably going to shrink. The private sector spend is going to fall, and notwithstanding the government's intentions to spend more publicly, the government doesn't particularly have a good track record about how to do that. So we will probably be looking to downsize in the near future to something that is more sustainable through these tough times.
Thank you so much, Francois Hardy, Neil Cloete, Philip Kotze, for being on ThinkLead and being vulnerable, sharing your thoughts and feelings on leadership and just where we are, where your businesses are. It will help many leaders out there much more than you think and that you may believe. Brian, just last word as we close.
To have three gents like this, Neil, Philip, Francois, just absolutely amazing. As Adriaan said, we've run a number of these, and this one ranks right up there as the best. I've really enjoyed the constructive input, and those that get the opportunity to listen to this when we put it out into the social domain will really gain great value from this. So thank you, Francois. Thank you, Philip, and thank you, Neil. Adriaan, an excellent panel again.
That's ThinkLead, helping you think and lead on a whole new level in this crazy world. And that's what leaders need to do. Thank you for joining us, folks. All the best. Bye-bye.